Hello gamers, and welcome to my third episode of Quick View, where I skip the detailed specifics and jump straight to the pros, the cons, and finish with my final verdict. For this episode, we'll look at Resident Evil 7. For your information, do take note that I primarily played the game with the PlayStation VR. Also, Resident Evil 7 was one of the games I couldn't wait to play the most this generation, so for me, this game had a lot to live up to. Let's get started. First up, the pros. This is the scariest Resident Evil game I've ever played, and I played them all. The use of the PlayStation VR is brilliant. It definitely cranks up the horror, and aiming becomes easier. The atmosphere is very similar to the old school Resident Evil games. Speaking of the old school games, the good old classic inventory management system is back, except now it's even smoother. I love the Bakers. I mean, you'll hate them in the game, but they make an excellent addition to the story. Speaking of story, we're going back to a more survival-based story, which for me is very appreciated. Among every gameplay connection this game has to the old school games, my favorite is by far backtracking, something this series should have never parted ways to begin with, and I can't describe just how amazing the level design is in Resident Evil 7 thanks to this. There are other cool throwbacks to the old school games that I was so happy to see. Viewing items in 360 degrees is just one example of that. I also think it's worth noting that this game has the best DLC I've ever played. Sure, in a perfect world we wouldn't have to pay for it, but it was money well spent. Bedroom was brilliant, 21 is the best version of Blackjack I ever played, and Daughters was great too, although a little on the short side. That's not all I liked either. Overall, the DLC was really good. Next up, the cons. There is a bit of a lack in enemy variety. They mostly look the same, and to be honest, I miss zombies. Not all modes in the game are playable in VR. Speaking of VR, the outside environments are very ugly, and sometimes the game forces a blur effect until some elements finish loading, which can be annoying. I do want to point out though that luckily the majority of the game is inside, and overall the visuals are great, even in VR. The final verdict. If you are remotely into horror games, or even games that have amazing level design but you don't mind horror, do yourself a favor and play Resident Evil 7. The beginning hour demo was great, but it was just a small taste of what you could expect. I know not everyone is into the whole first-person perspective thing, but that was not an issue for me thanks to the whole VR aspect. But I won't lie. The day I see a new Resident Evil game with fixed camera, my hype level will be through the roof. I've already said this in a previous video, but the old school Resident Evil games are literally my favorite games of all time. Not just because of the horror, but the backtracking, the puzzles, the unique music, limited ammunition, the inventory management system, having a story based on survival, all of which are present in Resident Evil 7. Thanks for tuning into my third episode of Quick View, and please feel free to agree or disagree in the comments below. Take care, you Nintendo fans and all-around gamers. Enjoy gaming. Guard out.